Right now, it's time for the news, and we'll see what's happening in the news front and all along those lines. I see I've got one of the founders of the network, and we'll see how things are going in that sense and along those lines. But we've got a number of things taking place, including Israel's strike on school turns shelter in Gaza, kills 27, even though I'm hearing some numbers that is closer to 28, and they fired at a UN position in Lebanon. So that's something that we're seeing in the news. And of course, Ratan Tata, a former chairman of the Indian conglomerate Tata Group, dies at the age of 86. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And Israeli forces fired UN peacekeeper positions in South Lebanon, and definitely that's something else that we're seeing as well as Israeli troops fire at three UNIFIL positions in southern Lebanon, according to UN sources. So that's something else that is going on in the news as well. So definitely a lot taking place in that way. Just like Han Kang wins the Nobel Prize in Literature for the intense poetic prose confronting the humane fragility. So that's something else going on because those Nobel Peace Prizes have been coming on, and definitely Han Kang, who's vegetarian, was made into a film, wins the Nobel Prize for Literature. And it looks like the death toll in a gang attack on a Haitian town rises to at least 115. So it looks definitely Haiti has got its issues as well. And William Lay, Taiwan's president, vows to resist annexation. So he urges calm amid military threats from Beijing. So that is the new leader there as Taiwan celebrated its National Day holiday against the background of Chinese threats. So definitely that's something going on. And Zelensky says Russia's war must end no later than 2025. So Ukraine's Zelensky discusses long-range missile use with Britain and NATO in a London visit, and he explains what it would take to end Putin's war in 2025. So I guess he's trying to make sure that war ends next year. And Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary gets a hostile serenade in Strasbourg. So that's something else that is in the news as well. And the Kremlin refutes the Trump denial on sending Putin COVID testing equipment. So Putin ties are back in the spotlight after a new book describes their calls and everything along those lines. And I believe that was the book by Bob Woodard and all in that kind of way. And definitely, like I said, a number of things are happening, including protests at Brown. So Brown says no to pro-Palestinian students' demand for divestment. So Brown rejected a call to divest from companies in connection with pro-Palestinian protests. So definitely that's something else that we're seeing. And Netanyahu appeal to the Lebanese people falls on deaf ears in Beirut. So Netanyahu warned Lebanon of destruction similar to what we see in Gaza. So definitely that's something else that we're seeing as well. And apparently, if you're wondering about the impact of climate on the nature and everything, they're saying that Earth's wildlife population has disappeared at a catastrophic rate. So definitely, it looks like there is a severe decline in wildlife. So definitely, there is a new report that reveals a catastrophic declines of animals worldwide, and some people are wondering if it is accurate. But definitely, that is what one of the reports says: is that the collapse in wildlife population is near the point of no return. So that's something else we're seeing as well. And as I mentioned yesterday, Elon Musk X is cleared to resume service in Brazil after it obeys the court orders from that particular area. So Brazil Supreme Court lifted the ban on the social media site X, and X is cleared to return to Brazil after Musk bows to the judge's demands. And some people are going to wonder who's going to be leading the British Conservatives, and apparently there are some surprising finalists and all along those lines. So we'll see who's going to be running the government in that part of the world as well. And the French government is to present a 2025 belt tightening budget. So France plans to slash public spending and tax the rich in budget. So definitely we're seeing a lot of news in that sense and along those lines. So we'll see what else is going on the United States side, and then I'll bring in my fellow panelists and see what they've got to say. Apparently, Hurricane Milton is leaves destruction around storm-weary Florida, but apparently the damage, according to some people, including our founder or one of the founders, is not as bad as it could have been, and all along those lines. So definitely, we'll see how this impacts rescue efforts around Helene and other places as well. Looks like 4 dead in the St. Lucie County from tornadoes. And I know that there was a picture that I think Kim has of one of the major stadiums that the roof was ripped off and all along those lines. And it looks like Ruben Gallego and Kerry Lake square off in a sharp-edged Arizona Senate debate. So they square off, spar over immigration and abortion in that Arizona Senate debate. So definitely we'll see what happens in that race. There, Gallego and Lake go on the offensive on immigration and abortion during the debate there in Arizona. I think we've got a debate of lesser candidates coming up that our own David Walker will be conducting. I think that's in less than 2 weeks, but Kim may have some thoughts around that as well. But a severe geomagnetic storm could cause colorful auroras over Northern California and Alabama. So northern lights may be back tonight in Massachusetts, according to the forecast map. So some people may be paying attention to the solar storms, which are expected to bring northern lights. And definitely, Democratic strategists are warning Harris that she is losing black male voters in Michigan. And Magic Johnson came out and said that African American men should vote for Harris because Trump did not deliver on promises to the black community. And he spoke about backing Kamala Harris for president. And apparently, in a campaign event in that area, there was some star-studded push to get the African American vote out there, and particularly African American males. And one of the quotes was, "Black man, we need you." And apparently, Harris and Trump are locked in a virtual dead heat in major swing states. So we've got less than a month to go. And definitely, they're saying young voters in Michigan could be the deciding factor, and it could be the deciding factor for Kamala Harris. And of course, a lot of people are also paying attention to what's going on in Pennsylvania. There are some signs that despite blue collar troubles, Harris has a slight lead over Trump in Pennsylvania. So definitely there are a lot of things going on in that way. And Biden and Netanyahu spoke for the first time in months as the Middle East crisis deepens. So a lot's going on and all along those lines. And the future of housing is at stake in County Sopa's race, and that's in California and all along those lines. So definitely housing is an important issue as well. And I saw two interviews, one with Kamala Harris. I did not see the one that was done yesterday. And all along those lines, I think it was with Stephen Colbert, where she apparently brandished a beer. I did watch one with some folks that featured Donald Trump on yesterday, and all along those lines. And he actually was theorizing that it was foreign individuals that were the reason that he had those assassination attempts. And all along those lines. I'm trying to remember the name of the podcast, but apparently it's a very popular one. But I'm going to bring in people and see what they've got to say about a number of these stories. Got
Good
Kimberly.
morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning, Adam. Good morning. Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Good morning, Kim. How are you?
Yep. Good morning, Rick and Sasha. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Before we get started, I just want to make everyone aware that this is, National Breast Cancer Month awareness. I just lost a longtime dear friend who fought for many, many years, breast cancer, and lost the battle a month ago. So I would just like to encourage people to get out there, get their mammograms, other tests done. Mammograms aren't perfect. Do your daily tests that you've been taught to do. But let's fight and win this battle together. Because it still exists as a major problem. I do have friends that are having lumps removed right now. So, we just need to help support the people during this time of the month. That's what this is. So, thank you everyone for giving me a minute there. Also, a little PSA that Jatovi wanted me to mention is that it's not just the iPhone 14 and up that has the satellite feature. Please check your Android, but be prepared. Check it, find out where it's located, so that if you need a emergency satellite access for any of the anything, actually, if you're in a cell area and you break down and your cell tower's down, use it. So just be aware that this feature exists. It's usually in the upper right hand corner of your phone where you can pull down and take a look and see there will be a satellite symbol, and you can click on that and locate a satellite if your cell tower is down. Please don't overuse it or abuse it. This is for emergencies only.
Yeah, definitely the important things, and definitely I have some friends that have been fighting breast cancer and have lost some to that disease as well. And you're right, October
No
is Breast
disease.
Cancer Awareness Month, and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, one of my dear friends has been fighting it for a number of years, and all along those lines. So I can definitely relate to folks having an important concern around that particular illness and all along those lines. So don't know if Adam or others have thoughts around breast cancer awareness, or if you have folks that are in that space or along those lines. Actually, ironically, and I just saw your hand, Rick. There are even though it's usually seen as a women's disease, there are men that are struck by breast cancer as well. So that is something that is not as much, but it is actually a possibility, and all along those lines. So, Rick, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about cancer awareness in general. That there are cancers like kidney cancer that used to be found only after they started to have symptoms, cause symptoms like blood in your urine, and at that point you're in trouble. But if you've got good insurance and you can talk your doctor into letting you have an abdominal MRI or ultrasound, do it, because now it's shifted, and most kidney cancers are detected when they're still teeny, before they're dangerous. That can apply to pancreatic too, which is also found with an abdominal, because by the time pancreatic causes symptoms, you're screwed. But they can catch it now with just an early scan when you feel perfectly healthy, if you're in your 50s or 60s.
And there are also, and people aren't aware of this, but I'm glad that you mentioned that. Try to do as much screening as you can and request it. There are blood tests that they can do that can detect cancers in your body as well. So, and I always ask for it because, my mother died of hepatic duct cancer, which should have been detected in a blood test. Because she had been sick for quite some time, but they overlooked that. But I ask for that particular blood test every time I go in. So just take a look at some of the screening options you have. Look at your family history. Breast cancer is still very prevalent. In my travels, I've learned most of the cancers that we deal with on a high volume are not as big of an issue in other countries. They have it, but not as prominent as we have it. So it might be, something that we can look at preventing, like, whether we smoke or what we eat, just how much fresh air you get. I don't know, but I do know that I brought this issue up with some people, and they say it's not as big of an issue in their countries as it is ours. So we should do some research in that area.
It's interesting you say that, because when I did a online dinner parties I often do on Wednesday on yesterday, and the guest was actually from Italy. They're an inclusion and diversity expert and everything, but they said that we are definitely at the top in a lot of fields, meaning America and all along those lines, because they are I think a tri-citizen, because they married somebody from Italy, live in Italy, but they are British citizens and U.S. citizens. Matter of fact, they're from Florida and have already sent in their absentee ballot and all along those lines. But they were mentioning that there are a couple of things, including health, that we could do better in and everything. There were some things that the United States is falling, and I think even Adam has talked about this in the 30s and the 50s category versus some of the things that we are leading at and everything. Not to say that we're not a great country,
especially if you're Jewish. If you're Ashkenazi Jewish, which is Eastern European Jewish, definitely get checked out. There are genetic screenings you can get done, because the deal is that the Jews in past centuries tended to hook up with Jews, which preserved a bunch of dangerous genes that can cause breast cancer and uterine cancer and stuff like that. The BRCA gene. So if you're Jewish, get screened for your genes.
That makes a lot of sense. Make sure that and there are other ethnic groups that have different propensities to certain diseases and all along those lines. So folks who get tested regardless of who they are and all along those lines. I did have a question based on the news that I had brought up earlier and all in that space. I've noticed a number of animals that are still out there. I mean, I can't say that I've seen a deer recently, but I've definitely seen rabbits here in North Carolina and butterflies, even though it's October and everything. But there was the news report that there is a shortage of wildlife, or that wildlife is starting to disappear, and it could be catastrophic. Their words, not mine, and everything. So I was just wondering how much, wherever you are, Adam, I think you've been in different places. You're currently in Georgia, and you've been to family roots in New Jersey and everything, and Sasha's in Canada. So have y'all seen a number of animals, and are you concerned that there might be a shortage of animals and wildlife? Because this is a new report that came out that said that we might be hurting and harming our fellow species.
Mark, I couldn't hear the question, so if anybody else did, why don't you? I'll defer to you guys.
Well, the question was, go ahead, Rick.
Mark's asking if that there are reports that just wildlife populations are dropping precipitously in various parts of the world, and if, as we heard about that, does it affect our parts of the world? And I just wanted to say that some of the things that are causing environmental problems will save us from environmental problems. One thing is that social media and streaming services have us so distracted that we are making fewer babies, and so we're going to reach maximum human population a lot sooner than we thought, and at a lot lower level, at 9.6 billion in like 2060, which is good for the planet, because if it goes down from there, then we'll be doing less damage than if the population kept increasing to 12 and 13 and 14 billion.
Shaquille, what's your take on this? You're in Australia. Australia definitely has some exotic animals, some that I've always admired, thinking that they are sometimes cute, like kangaroos and koala bears. But also, you know, y'all have some animals that are very dangerous as well. So, are you seeing a drop in wildlife there in Australia? Because Australia is actually known for its wildlife. But I just wondering if you're seeing a drop in wildlife presentation in Australia. And do you buy this report that there is a catastrophic disaster happening with our wildlife?
Yeah, I think we are losing wildlife. Australia, I guess, is fairly lucky because we're somewhat like Canada, except we've got better weather. Most Canadians live pretty close to the border of the US, and the rest of the country is quite sparsely populated. Australia, most Australians live on the coast, especially the east coast of Australia, and the rest of the country is pretty sparsely populated. So animals do have plenty of places to live, but look, environmental concerns, the way the climate's changing, I think, just the overuse of fossil fuels and us going in and destroying their habitats certainly has an effect all over the world. We do have to be careful about it. We've been hearing for years now about the precipitous decline in the bee population. Surely that's an issue because, we kind of need bees because the bees pollinate the things that we eat. So, I am concerned about that, actually. Same thing with wild fish stock. But perhaps we need to give the ocean a bit of a rest and have a brief moratorium, because I think that our fish and life in general is very resilient, but you need to give it a break, give it a chance to recover. And that is a big problem.
Shaquille, there is even bigger problem. That certain people eat dogs and cats. And this is far the bigger problems than anything what you were mentioning.
Well,
Rumor has
if I say anything about Donald Trump, I'm going to get blasted for it, so I'm not going to say a word.
Rumor has it, but rumor has a lot of things that we should be avoiding.
Speaking of Donald Trump, and Shaquille's going to love this one that I bring it up because I was trying to remember the name of the podcast. Yes, I did watch quite a bit of it yesterday. Actually, he did a good job on the podcast because it was him talking to various entertainers because of the comic podcast that he was on and everything. But Trump on the Flagrant podcast, that's the name of the podcast, actually brought up this notion of a couple of things. One, he brought up the notion that the assassination attempt was ordered by folks from other countries, namely Iran, is who I think he named and everything. And he really wanted Apple to open up the phones. He said they could do it with J6, and he wanted to know if they could do it with J6. Why couldn't they do it with the phones of the people that allegedly were, well, not allegedly, but were trying to shoot at him? And all along those lines, he also admitted that he does do this thing called the We, where he does, and as y'all can tell, I probably do something similar, where you go into this storytelling mode, and then you try to come back to the point that you were originally making and everything. So he made light of this style of his and everything along those lines. So I did watch it, and like I said, I was actually he did a reputable job in terms of being a communicator. Like I said, he was there with 4 folks, including he talked about his relationship with India, and basically called the Indian president kind of a badass. And I kind of paraphrased what he said and everything. But I was just wondering, y'all's take if anybody else watched any of this podcast and everything, because it was an interesting podcast. And if you can get on Flagrant, Donald, if you're listening, you're perfectly welcome. There are people that like you, there are people that don't like you on this network, but you're perfectly welcome to come onto the network and talk to Pod TV as well, since you went on Flagrant podcast as well. But did anybody else watch this? And what do you think of this notion of international forces being
so
behind the shooting?
So Trump has freedom in what he says, in that he can say anything without losing some more support among his base. So, you know, if he has a passing thought, like, you know, if I said every passing thought, it would be like, look at that butt. Oh, that's a good butt. I'm at the gym. Oh, wait, I shouldn't be looking at butts. I can go home and look at dirty pictures. So, like, you know, I can never run for office because of all the crazy crap I've said that would be brought out if I ran for office. Also, I'd be terrible at politics.
But Rick, that's the thing that he brought. But that's the thing that even he brought up, because he brought up during the interview that he did not know whether they were left and right. And to be perfectly honest, in watching it, because there was 4 comedians, including one that was of Indian descent, the main host, and I can't remember all of their names and everything, but he could not tell whether they were left and right. And as I was watching the interview, I really couldn't tell either, because they kind of laughed at the notion of him always being truthful, because he made a comment about how he basically considers himself a truthful person, and the person that was conducted the interview kind of laughed at that remark and everything. But they hit $1.5 million.
So, Larry, it's not that he's.
If you're listening, we want you on Pod TV. So they did hit 1.5 million views. So definitely, what is our thoughts? Does anybody know about Flagrant? Is Flagrant conservative?
It's not that he's truthful as much as he has no filter, and you know, that for some people that's refreshing in a politician, that he just says whatever he wants whenever he wants.
I think what you said at the beginning, Rick, is the truth part. And what Donald Trump said that was honest was that he could shoot anybody on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any support. So he has no filter because nobody's leaving him, because he's a cult figure. And because of that, he can get away with saying anything and everything, and people will defend him regardless of what he says. He is graded on a different curve. He's sanitized by the media. Whatever he says, he's going to get away with. But that is where we are with who he is. Because, for example, the joke that Sasha brought up about eating dogs and cats, anybody else who said something racist and bigoted as that is, would have been gone. He yells out all the offensive things and anti-Semitic things, goes out with Laura Loomer, one of the biggest racists and anti-Semites out there. Nothing happens to him. People defend what he does. He meets with one of the biggest anti-Semites, Yiannopoulos, and all the other people at Mar-a-Lago. Oh, well, you know, he meets with totalitarian or authoritarian dictators and praises them about how great they are and all this. Oh, well, you know, he's just Donald Trump. Oh, when COVID hits and we're struggling for things, send stuff to Putin. And, oh, well, you know, he's helping out. It's whatever Donald Trump says, people will defend it. And he's a cult figure. That's what he is right now.
So you could make the argument, it doesn't matter what he says, that's just the way he is. But one real world implication of him being reelected that we were just talking about is we get another 4 years where we make no progress, that the U.S. gives up its role as a leader in fighting climate change, because it's part of its.
Rick, you don't even have to point to that. The real world consequences of what he says. Stochastically terrorizing Springfield by yelling out everything, where people were having bomb threats and all that stuff, was him. January 6th was him. What's happening with the recovery and situation where actually individuals that are individuals in FEMA that are being attacked through anti-Semitic measures, that's him. All this stuff has real world consequences, but people turn around and defend what he says, laugh it off like, oh, well, haha, it's just a joke. No, there are real world consequences. But the problem is, again, he say anything, he's graded on a different curve, and it's unreal to watch, because we're sitting here and debating how he can slur his words. Had Biden done that, we can sit here and talk about how he says we would have a purge. We would have basically the government go out, the cops and everything would have one day of violence. I would be a dictator on day one. Kamala Harris says anything like that. The right wing went crazy over a tan suit Obama wore.
But on the flip side of that, Jacoby,
all these things are rated on a different scale.
Hold on a second. On the flip side of that, Jacoby, a lot of
the
press coverage lately, and I'm going to get to you, Shaquille. A lot of the press that has been on both sides has been what amounts to pop culture press. Because, like I said, Kamala Harris appeared on Howard Stern. I also watched an interview yesterday that was, I think, earlier in last month, that was Matt Barnes and Stephen Jackson and everything, where they were talking about mental health and they were talking about other issues, but it was Kamala Harris on like the pop side of industry.
You're missing what I'm saying. That pop culture press is still there, but had Kamala Harris gone on The View and sit and taken Laura Loomer as her good friend, as his good friend, said that he knows everything about this candidate and wants this candidate, and this is a great man. The same man who yells out that some people need to kill him, that he's a black Nazi. Had Kamala Harris picked out that dude, even on pop culture on The View.
I'm going to get to Sasha. He lost a major supporter, though. He lost a major supporter because the major supporter that he had, meaning Trump, was Fontes. It was definitely a member of a very that
Nick
kind of like organization and everything. But he just recently came out and said that he will not be voting for Trump. I doubt it's very seriously going to be voting for Kamala. So I'm trying to figure out
the anti-Semitic guy who
votes for it, because he's of the impression that what he said is that Trump will fill up his cabinet or fill up his term with people that are not pro 2025 and that are going to be gay and Jewish and everything. So
the anti-Semite that he had lunch with at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, that guy. We're worried.
That guy's now saying that he won't vote
for him.
Right, here's Sasha sitting here. Here's Sasha.
Well, let Sasha speak. He's been waiting.
Yep.
Yeah, Sasha.
I'm really surprised at ignorance. I'm having my hand for the last 15 minutes or so, and people are talking and talking and talking. It must be something very important what you're talking about, but it's not. It's not important what you're talking about. It's okay. I have a question to Adam. Adam, I look today at the stock of Kroger. It keeps going up, and dividends are being increased thanks to loyal shoppers like yourself. But just explain to me what Democrats or Republicans have to do with the stock and company of Kroger. What's your opinion?
Well, I shop at Kroger 50% of the time. I also shop at Aldi's the other half of the time, which is a discount.
I love Aldi.
Like we talked about on the last, I believe it was a few shows ago, I don't think either party has much to do with it. But regarding Trump, one of the things that upsets me most about him was evident in the first debate, where he just talks off the cuff, wasn't prepared, says things that are outlandish. When in fact, if you looked at the debate with J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, J.D. Vance was 100 times better at debunking a lot of the things that Walz said, and Trump could have done the same thing with Harris, but instead he goes off on these tangents and these rants that aren't productive. Because I think he'd probably be winning by a lot if it wasn't for the things that he says. But like I also said on a couple of shows ago, I don't really look at what he says. I look at what he did, and I compare it to what happened in the last 4 years as it pertains to my personal financial circumstances. And like I said, I am paying over 30 to 40% more in groceries. I'm paying more in gas prices. And financially, I'm in a much worse position than I was in the Trump administration. And I also look at his foreign policy, and I compare it to foreign policy under Biden. And I think Trump certainly has the edge there. And I also look at, like I said, what he does, not what he says. There was significant wage growth under Trump. There was low unemployment. There was low inflation. And he's not going to be a dictator because we have a system of checks and balances. But I don't believe anything a politician says during an election season. And when I cast my vote, it's based on one reason and one reason only: my financial and economic circumstances. And they are far worse in the last 4 years than they were in the years when Trump was president.
Adam, it's so easy to improve. I'll tell you what you should do. First of all, you have to grow your own vegetables, and that will supply constantly your income. Second of all, instead of shopping at Kroger's, buy shares of Kroger's, become shareholder of Kroger's, and at Kroger, and you will first of all, stock will appreciate. You will get wonderful dividends, and by growing your own vegetables, you will have a fresh, great supply of food for yourself and your family. So this is, and then you will love Democrats, you will love Republicans, you will love everybody because your economic situation would improve greatly.
Well, that's why voters vote. And as Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. And don't think that I'm a proud supporter of Donald Trump. I think both candidates, I can't believe these are the only candidates we have to choose from. I didn't vote for Trump in 20. I didn't vote for him in 2016. But the choice here is a very bad one. And so my vote is a reluctant one, but it's ultimately based on how was my financial situation in 2016 to 20 as opposed to 2024? And it's markedly worse for reasons I stated. The gas pump, the grocery store. And geez, look at housing prices. It's ridiculous. So I wouldn't say that I'm part of the Trump cult by any means. But when I look at the two candidates, what choice do I have?
So I want to weigh in on the side of Trump here, where we already had 4 years of him, and the first 3 years you could argue, if you're conservative, were good in terms of wages and inflation, and 2020 was okay. So 2020 was truly awful, and because of COVID, it shut down the country. We had more jobless because the country was shut down than any time before or since. But you could argue, I wouldn't, but you could argue that COVID, was a stroke of bad luck. I think it was bad luck plus, bad
for
governance.
both of them, Biden and Trump.
Well, okay, so Trump only had 1 year of COVID, but we're coming to the end of year 5 of COVID. So we've had almost 4 years of COVID under Biden. So yeah, the death toll under Biden is going to be higher because he's had 4 times as many months of COVID as Trump. And yeah, the CDC and Biden have been guilty of soft peddling COVID, saying back to normal when shit isn't normal. But the U.S. has had some excellent presidents, and it's had some piss poor presidents, and we've gotten through it. And, I have tweeted a lot that this is Germany, 1933, that if we let him in again, he's going to burn it all down. But that's not, that's an exaggeration. His ability to burn down the country, hold on, is limited by, among other things, his incompetence. Hitler was much smarter than Trump. So, and Trump, like a lot of the competent people that he hired the first time around, won't work for him again. So it'll be a clown show, but it probably will be a clown show that doesn't burn the country down. we may get a Supreme Court that's even worse if he gets to a point. He will get to a point, at least 2 more justices. But
Rick, along those same
we'll
lines,
get
just
through
really
it.
quickly, because that's what I
Well,
asked earlier and everything, and I did see your hand, Jacoby, because I was actually going to direct this to you, Jacoby. But like I said, 1.5 million is a decent amount of people that watch a podcast, and I have no idea what this flagrant folks are and everything. So have you ever heard of flagrant, and is it as popular as apparently it was when Mr. Trump decided to come on it yesterday? Because I've never heard of the flagrant podcast until I stumbled across it yesterday.
I mean, I don't. That's kind of unrelated to the question that we were just discussing. But yeah, I don't know about Flagrant podcast. I've never watched Flagrant podcast. The Call Me Daddy podcast is the number 2 right behind Joe Rogan, and them both going on alternative media is a good thing for both campaigns, because that's what they're doing right now. Is trying to reach other populations that aren't normally active. So they're trying to activate them through those non-traditional media areas. What Rick is talking about, and I think the perception again is what we're still dealing with. And yes, Rick is correct. There's 1 year of COVID. Trump took an economy from the Obama administration that was actually doing well, and it continued on. And Trump did some things that were positive, but also a lot that were negative. His handling of the crisis, which every president has to deal with a crisis, and giving him the benefit of the doubt because his mishandling of the crisis caused a problem, isn't one of those things. For example, we're dealing with hurricane season right before the election, but it's a crisis. It's what presidents have to do, and their handling of those crises, because there are multiple that go on in a presidency, because the actual idea that, oh, well, the world wasn't at war and all this stuff, those are fantasy things, because those things happen. Under Bush, when people say, there were no wars and all this stuff under Bush, well, you forget about 9/11 and all the other things that went on. There are things that took place, and we always run that same redundant false talking point. Every campaign runs it. From when Obama came in, when he in 2008 was talking about, are you better now than you were 4 years ago or 8 years ago? That is one of those things that's always run, and it's a fantasy, because we have to talk about where we are today. Because truthfully, 4 years ago, we weren't better. Truthfully, we were sitting in the middle of COVID, but we forget that. We were sitting with protests regularly happening, and Trump had used the actual National Guard to clear out a pathway so he could walk across to his church and take a photo. We had dead bodies going into freezers. This was all due to COVID. It was a crisis that was going on. And yes, he did warp speed under his administration, but he campaigned against that same science, which created a problem coming into the next administration. He also had the Abraham Accords, but he also met with the Taliban and pulled out so many soldiers in the Afghan area or in Afghanistan, leaving us only with 2,500. But he also did a negotiation where he released 5,000 Afghan prisoners that went straight back into that same area. So there's a lot of context that we're forgetting. So when you always say, and this is why I asked you the question the other day, which I'm still waiting on an answer for and would love an answer for, because you're an intelligent individual and I know you think these things through. So I'd love an answer. But to talk about, well, we have the history of what he did in the past, but we're forgetting about his crisis response. We're forgetting about all the other things that happened and living in this romantic idea of what it was. We're at a position now where we're talking about our economy. There are reports already of price gouging going on, dealing with Hurricane Helene, the two hurricanes that just hit Florida, the hurricane that just hit North Carolina, and talking about price gouging. What are the economic measures that Donald Trump is putting forward to talk about the future? Because when we're looking at all these things in the future and saying, well, which is what I want to push back against you, Rick, when you say, well, things can't get any Well, he had protective measures around him, and you do realize that with the campaign to overturn 2006, they put actual electors in place currently that are doing bad things to overturn the next election and do things that way.
Fewer people
So
are
all
going to
these
get to
things
vote.
you're talking about that he cannot do, these are things that, okay, you messed up the first time, so you learn about how to do it the way you want to the next time. So we cannot ignore that there are going to be problems in the future. But to get back to the economic question, which is what most people vote on, very correct. What is his plan for the future? And not, hey, this is what he did in the past. The past isn't there anymore. We have to move on.
Well,
what is the plan for the
all right,
future?
so so luck plays a huge role in the presidency. Clinton was super lucky. The biggest, I mean, there was the fall of Yugoslavia and Kosovo and all that under his watch, where he went in there and he bombed. But really, the biggest crisis of his presidency was him jizzing on a dress. He was a lucky guy. His predecessor, the first Bush, was also fantastically lucky in that we won the Cold War under Bush. The wall came down, the Soviet Union collapsed, but because Bush won, Bush number one said no new taxes, read my lips, that screwed him, so he didn't get a second term. But you have to be prepared for good luck and bad luck. But hold on, one more point quickly. We fired the most experienced guy who could maybe deal with bad luck stuff because he's been in government for 50 years. We fired him because he's old as heck, he looks old as heck, and his sentences are stumbly now. So,
but Rick, speaking of that, and along that line of luck and everything, and I don't know, maybe Kim's got some ideas, maybe other people on the panel have some ideas as well. But what are our thoughts? Because there has been some speculation that there might need to be some changes in what we're going to allow, particularly in North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, which were hit by that hurricane, around access and everything. So they're even talking about like making some adjustments in those 3 states, which are swing states, with the electorate, because it's going to be hard for some people to get to the polls and everything along those lines. So I have heard grumblings of the possibility that there might be some extensions and some things that'll be changed.
Well,
and everything.
we need to take that in consideration, because when you just talk about, there's over 500,000 people who will not be able to probably vote up in the mountains, and maybe some other people in the North Carolina area that have suffered from the hurricane. Also Florida, I don't know how many people are going to be detached from being able to vote, but I know people get this in their head, they can mail in vote, but some of them don't even have an address, let alone a home or any means to register properly for that. And, we've had so many accusations of elections being tampered with. I think we just need to be very, very careful. I want to bring up a few things. If you're financially struggling, this is a conversation I've had with other people. I'm blessed, but I'm also thankful that I've never relied on the presidency or the administration for my financial stability, though I know a lot of people do. And I know a lot of laws impact that. I want people to be aware that if you're impacted negatively, don't look at the administration that you're facing today. Look at the policies and laws that we've had to live with since 2017, which was the Tax Cut Job Act, which actually if you take a look at the BLS reports, which is a government site for the Bureau of Labor Stats, they show statistically after that act was put into place that the highest job cuts we had in history were right there at 2020, and not because of COVID. It was in January 2020, we were experiencing the highest job cuts. And the reason is that the act gave corporations 40% tax cut It was to improve income and improve more jobs for middle class. But at the same time, they gave individuals a 40% tax cut who were earning over $400,000. What happened, the results were from the research that we looked at, a lot of executives got pay increases and a lot of job cuts occurred. Also, taxes went up on a lot of people to recover the tax deficit, which was over $5 trillion. And it has been predicted if we continue with the Tax Cut Job Act, which is due to expire in 2025, depending on who gets into office, if we continue on that path, our deficits will be up, the job cuts will continue, and deficits in the foreign sector will continue as well. There is a huge review board. They are bipartisan, very bipartisan. Sometimes you get some disputes and arguments. But what I'm saying isn't to tell you which politician to vote for. I am saying vote in the direction that does protect your pocketbook. This is what frustrates me, is people are not looking at that. They're looking at what they see today. They're not looking at what took it that long to get there. Also, another big impact for the Harris, Biden and Harris admin at the time was the fact that they had to recover from the decisions made during COVID. And I want to tell people, you sit there and you say that this administration had 2 full weeks to prepare for the hurricane. You can't really predict where a hurricane's going to land and the destruction that it's going to do. But all you can do is just pray that your teams are ready to go and they can go. But guess what? Trump and his admin had months, and I'm talking months, to prepare for COVID. You can go look at the data. I was there in Florida when we were talking to people from around the world in December preparing for the Super Bowl. They were talking about COVID spreading then and washing your hands, and you should start wearing masks. So be very careful on what you blame a particular administration for your situation. Take a look at the laws. Take a look at how long we've had to live with the laws. Take a look at the impact of one person's decision, one leadership's decision. I mean, he fired the most experienced person in the world to protect us from a pandemic impact, huge, devastating impact, promised to hire them back if we ever needed them, and he didn't do it. So I want you to take a look at the decisions that the leaders made and how they really impacted you. Not just now, but the butterfly effect or the ripple effect, because the ripple effect of the Tax Cut Job Act has hurt a lot of middle class, but even more so people who make less than $72,000. That's who they high increased taxes on in order to recover from the tax deficit. Then they increase people who made between $72,000 to $399,000, but they definitely didn't increase the taxes on people making more than $400,000 who were getting the 40% tax cut. So take a look at the laws, take a look at the policies that you've had to live with, and determine whether those are to your benefit, because I would hate to see you continue struggle. But my sister has finally kind of agreed with me, because she said, you've preached this for years. I don't rely on the president taking care of my pocketbook. And Rick has had his hand up for quite some time. I'm off my bench.
I'm just saying that if Biden is smart about this, he'll have another press conference with Buttigieg and say that they're going to appoint like a voting czar and a FEMA quality control czar to go in, make sure that FEMA is doing a good job, and that voting will be protected in the wrecked states. Also, Biden should have a chart that explains that fights the bullshit about the $750, where he's got a chart and it says $750 now, thousands of bucks later, after 1 month, when we get in and see your damage and you fill out some paperwork, and then even more money here and more money here, and explain what the whole deal is.
Well, I just want to make 3 quick points. First, I agree with Kim that I do agree that you have to look at how a certain administration is affecting you at economically in your wallet. And like I said, I was far better off under Trump than I was under Biden. Now, Jacoby also made a good point that some presidents do good things. Well, presidents do good things and they do bad things. And that's true of every president. But what I've seen a lot of is when Trump did anything good, they said it was because of Obama. But when Biden does something good, and he certainly did good things, he gets all the credit for it. And that I think is problematic. I also think when it comes to the Trump's tax cuts, I mean, Trump did double the standard deduction, and he did cut taxes for the middle class. And as far as COVID goes, I don't blame Joe Biden at all for COVID, but I also don't blame Donald Trump. COVID was going to run its course, okay? And I don't think either Biden or Trump deserves blame, and I think we need to be fair about that. But again, like Kim said and someone else alluded to, yeah, I'm looking at how my personal economic circumstances are, and I think most voters are, and inflation has been crushing the last 4 years, and grocery prices have gone up, and in addition to that, housing prices and gas prices. Okay, now the final thing I'll say is Jacoby asked me, well, tell me about Trump's policies going forward, and my answer is the same. I don't listen to what a politician says during a presidential election. I look at what they did, okay? And when I look at what Trump did and the effect it had on me, and when I look at what Biden did and the effect it had on me, I'm left with a very reluctant choice in an election where neither candidate is particularly appealing.
Okay, I would like to mention something about economy. It just crossed the tape that the latest inflation now in United States is 2.4%, excluding those people who shop at Kroger's. Of course, for them, inflation is much higher than that.
You don't like Kroger, do you?
I love it. In Canada, we don't have Kroger's, by the way, because nobody can afford Kroger's in Canada. So there are no stores of Kroger's. But it's 2.4%. What we are talking about, the ideal scenario, according to Monetary Fund and all the institutions, is 2%. That's where the aiming of Federal Reserve is 2%. So it's 2.4. It's just a tiny fraction to get from 2.4 to 2. Now, on the other hand, another news is Dow Jones and S&P and every index went all-time highs today. And yesterday and day before yesterday. So this is a train that derails completely the Republican narrative that economy, people are struggling. Oh, please help or please do that. Forget about this. It's a losing issue. Concentrate on foreign policy. That's where Trump can beat Kamala Harris easily. That's all the facts are for Trump. He can't articulate it. With his mind of 11 years old, he cannot articulate it. So, okay, let Vance articulate it or somebody else, or hire somebody who can articulate it. But that's where you can really hit it. That's your last chance, nothing else.
Hey, Sasha, along those same lines, and I'm not saying this in a negative sense, but I think Adam brought it up and other people brought it up because I have friends on both sides of the spectrum and everything along those lines. And one thing that they say is that they hear what you're saying about the economy and the parts of the indicators that are up, but what they're more concerned about is kind of what Adam just said earlier, which is their pocketbook at the moment. So I think a lot of people are going to vote according to their pocketbook at the moment. So what do you say to those folks that aren't paying enough attention to the indicators and to the indicators maybe that will show it being better or that show that it is better for the overall economy, but not their personal
What I say is these people have to learn how to run their checkbook. I think that they are not capable of doing that properly.
Can I just point out that Steve Rouse here, and he's normally quite limited on time?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Steve, what you got to say about that? You're a political analyst, and you're definitely doing a lot in your own campaign. So how are you doing?
Well, real quickly, it's great to see. I guess he's still here. Maybe he left, Adam Lamparello. I think the main thing, real quickly, we're just on the ground in North Carolina, Josh Stein's taken a 20-point lead in the polls. So I think we're looking at possibly the largest landslide in North Carolina history. And there's a lot of Republicans really worried now about this affecting the presidential race. So we'll see. But I really think North Carolina is going to go to Harris just based on what I'm observing out there. J.D. Vance is coming this evening to Greensboro. But what I will say really quickly is that that I think the problem is that if you keep reducing taxes, you reduce the revenue, but at the same time, you can't continue to spend more and more money. And so this is the problem that we're having. And so the only president that balanced the budget was Bill Clinton. And, you know, we're looking at the budget, national debt's gone from 1.5 trillion to 33 trillion. The deficit's about 1.3 trillion. You know, what I often explain to people is the deficit is what the difference between what we're spending more than we're bringing in. So you really can't, we're on an unsustainable model, but it's really going to take Republicans and Democrats to come together. And this isn't just a Democratic issue. The Republicans that say, well, only the Democrats increase the debt. The debt started with Reagan. It's gotten worse with every president. Bush too increased it a lot with the wars in Afghanistan, the wars in Iraq, and then that added it. And then, of course, the COVID pandemic, we added with significant spending under Biden. And then Trump didn't reduce it either, made it worse with the tax cuts. But even Vice President Harris is talking about tax cuts. So I think both presidential candidates need to realize that you can't cut taxes if you're not bringing in new sources of revenue, which is just going to drive up the debt even more. So I think that this is disappointing. And I agree with David Walker. I've learned a lot about this with him. I brought him on WPTF to talk about it. And I mean, the only answer is a constitutional amendment, which will never happen, or getting people to focus in on it. But anyway, that's my take on it. I don't see it changing. Whoever wins the presidency, it's not going to change. So the debt's going to.
I agree. I think Rick has had his hand up, so we'll give him a minute. Hi, Rick.
I just have a quick, if you're worried about grocery prices, there's a thing you may not realize, that most supermarkets have a scratch and dent and day-old corner tucked away somewhere towards the back of the store. And that place, I always check it out. It's the home of all sorts of nice surprises, like booze for half off, and coffee pods and cakes and vitamins that are, you know, on the verge of being expired. I even got like expired sushi in London for £1, 7 pieces for $1.30 American. You know, and maybe that's a little risky, but I was freaking delighted. So find the expired corner in your store.
I was just going to say that
There you go.
I think what Adam said.
Solutions. I like that. Solutions are, you know, why not find solutions instead of, you know, you can blame all of them you want, but there are ways around it. I mean, find the solutions.
And I think that right there is the exact is why I asked Adam, you know, what are the solutions for the future? And I think, Adam, what you've expressed is what the simplistic idea and where we've not really educated the electorate as much as we should have. Because, for example, yes, you're right. Everybody, the pocketbook is what everybody focuses on. And when you don't, when you're saying that, oh, well, you don't blame Trump for this and don't blame Biden for COVID, that's, you know, null on each. Well, inflation was a global thing that was part of was created by COVID. And by every economic measure, the value of the dollar, the GDP, the stock market, every economic measure, we are doing better economically, sans inflation. And inflation itself being a global issue, is hard to actually explain that is a problem that was created, one, by COVID, but it is a global thing and so on and so forth. So the messaging itself and the focus on the pocketbook that, hey, groceries is more expensive now than they were before, but we forget that the actual policies that were put in place did bring down inflation and helped out. And that was a good thing of what they did. But to
We're
explain
at
that is
the
a little bit
top of
tougher
the
than going
hour.
to.
Okay.
Well, I enjoyed participating in the show today. It was
Go
awesome.
ahead,
Thanks for having me.
Sasha, and then we have to say goodbye.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Shaquille, I think you had much more fun yesterday on Modern Investing Show. So now, okay, I'll give my floor to Shaquille Address Economy.
Well, actually, we have to say goodbye. It's at the hour.
Yes, we do know that we have
Everyone,
to work,
and
so forgive
we'll
us that.
catch your show very soon because it is a lot more fun. Take care, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Be safe.